Hello, YouTube. We should be live there and also on Mixer. We're live now, Dan, by the way.
So I can't swear.
Nope, not anymore.
God darn it.
Yeah.
God
Hello,
darn it.
YouTube. Alright, let me pull up YouTube. Live there and also on Mixer. We're live now. Good. There we go. Sorry we're late. Well, on time, technically. We're just on time. No more, no less. Oh, let me reopen that tab. Let me just organize my stories because I'm just behind. Let's give it a Slack. Goodbye, Slack. All right, test my mic.
I'm sending out the tweet.
Testing 1 2 3. My computer's really slow today. Testing 1 2 3. I have a feeling it's time to upgrade to the Surface Studio 2. See how much memory Skype's eating now.
Just close Slack.
I did close Slack, but Skype is still active, using very high power. And for some reason, 10% of my GPU. Apparently, GPU power is needed to power Skype. That's annoying. Anyway, I am ready to go when you are.
All right, I am now recording.
I am now recording as well. Yeah, I'm recording.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Windows Central Podcast, episode 163 for January 24th, 2020. Hey everyone, January Rubino here, joined with Zach Bowden for another exciting episode of the Windows Central Podcast. And this week we got a lot going around Surface Duo. Specifically, its SDK was released, so we got to see how that Android software is going to behave, and Zach would tell us all about it, including if you want to try it yourself. Also mention about the Windows 10X SDK just around the corner, so coming out really soon as well. So that'll be for the Surface Neo and other dual screen Windows 10 PCs. Let's talk about the Xbox Series X ports leak. So this is always one of those fun things. It's kind of weird that you don't tell us the ports just right off the bat, but we don't know a lot of specs about the Series X. But we did get some more confirmation this week, and probably someone got fired as well for that leak. We'll briefly talk about the Surface Go Kensington docks. I did a quick review on this, and we'll just talk about why these kind of things are important for the Surface ecosystem. And finally, Zach will do a Windows 10 Insider build check-in because there were a release this week, believe it or not, for the Fast Ring. And we'll talk about how little there was actually new for that. Zach, how are you doing on this fine Friday?
I'm tired. It's been a long week.
It really has been a kind of a long week, and yeah, I'm not feeling great. I have like I don't know what's going on. I'm not sick, but I'm not healthy. So
Yeah.
I don't know what that's about, but hopefully I will be going on vacation, by the way, for those who will be curious, sometime mid-February, so I probably won't do a podcast one of those weeks, as I'll be in the sun and beach and enjoying life for a week.
Having a good time.
Hopefully. And then it goes to Mobile World Congress.
Yep.
And I'll also be visiting AMD sometime in February too in Houston, Texas, which will be fun. So always good. AMD's got a lot of momentum this year, a lot of excitement for them. They have, of course, their desktop stuff, and which is always doing well. But for me, the real interesting stuff is going to be their laptop. Because we haven't seen much. Yeah, sure, there's a Surface laptop, 315-inch, which isn't great with AMD, but that's their last gen. Now they got the Ryzen 4000 stuff coming out, and we haven't seen a ton of benchmarks. There's been some leaks of stuff, but it looks pretty promising. So I'll be going into getting a little more deep dive into that stuff. Hopefully, we'll see more AMD laptops this year, as it's always good for competition. But this week, we're going to be talking about here the Surface Duo. So, to refresh people's memories on this, Surface Duo, a dual screen Android phone coming out sometime in 2020. Microsoft's official stance is holiday 2020. we've heard some rumors that may actually come earlier. And this week we did see the SDK release, which was kind of a surprise. None of us had a heads up on this. But for those curious, an SDK, software development kit, is a way for developers to start testing out basically a dual screen Android experience, and they can start building apps for it and running it on an emulator, basically. And while that's cool for developers, it's actually a really good thing for developers. It's also neat because we get to see what the OS actually looks like in action. And I know it sounds weird. It's like, well, I mean, of course, it's dual screens. How can it look? But there's a lot of questions here about
Yeah.
the version Android that Microsoft is using, how the animations work, how does it look, and all that. So, Zach, you actually loaded up this emulator, which anyone can download, by the way, and install. We actually have a tutorial up on Windows Central right now on the front page explaining how to do this. So go try it yourself if you want. But, Zach, you downloaded it, tried it. What did you learn? And if you want, also for other people, there's a YouTube video out that we have on our channel.
Yeah.
Which goes through this, shows us how it all works.
So yeah, the emulator so far gives us a very early look at some of the customizations and changes Microsoft is making to Android 10 for the Surface Duo specifically. So obviously dual screen support, some unique gestures to support things like spanning and whatnot. And all of that early work is in this build, and you can try it out yourself. It is very buggy. It's sort of laggy here and there. Some of it's quite smooth, some of it's quite laggy. That's usually the nature of pre-release software. So it's not representative of the final product in any way, but it does give us a good idea of how Microsoft is thinking about the user experience on this device. So for example, if you've got an app open on one screen, to close it, you do what you normally do on an Android 10 device. You swipe up to close it. There's no dedicated navigation buttons. It's all gesture based here. To move it across displays, you just swipe on that navigation bar across the screen. So if you want to throw the app to the right screen from the left one, you just slide it along and it will switch screens. And the home screen experience, the Microsoft Launcher itself, will sort of adapt depending on which app you're using on what screen. If you're not running two apps, of course, if you're just running one app. But then there's also the ability to span apps across both displays. Now, so far, only Microsoft Edge and the Outlook app appear to support this natively. And what you do is you sort of just slide up the app as if you was about to close it, hold it there for a second, then sort of dock it to the center divider, and that will span it across both displays. And in Outlook, for example, that will put your inbox on the left screen and the email contents on the right screen. So when you tap on an email, that will show up on the right display. And that's I think that's the best sort of demo you can showcase for spanning. Because the other demo is in Edge, and right now that doesn't really work because the actual seam in the emulator cuts into the content on the web page, so you can't actually see everything, which is kind of annoying. I'm assuming that's a bug. Like I said, this is early software and whatnot. But
yeah, and we should point out, I mean, this SDK is going to be updated, right? It's just like
they've released two builds already.
Yeah, and so we expect Microsoft to update it regularly with new capabilities, new drivers, things like some of the Microsoft sections will get detailed and all this kind of stuff. So
yeah,
this is
it's worth mentioning thing. This image specifically is an AOSP version of the Android. So what's in this image is very sparse. There's no Play Store, for example. The only Microsoft apps installed are SwiftKey and Microsoft Edge. I had to do a bit of sort of manual downloading and installing apps to get Outlook on there and whatnot. But yeah, so this isn't a representation of the shipping image. This just gives us a good idea of some of the stuff that Microsoft is working on for Surface Duo, mainly those gestures and dual screen support. But any specific Surface Duo experiences, such as inking or unique features in apps for the Surface Duo, those aren't here yet. Likely because Microsoft wants to keep that as a surprise for another event sometime in the near future. I was actually quite surprised they released the Duo SDK this early. I wasn't expecting this until February at least, which makes sense because the 10X SDK is coming in February because that's not ready just yet. Windows 10X is a little bit behind compared to the version of Android running on the Surface Duo, which is kind of why we're expecting Duo to launch much earlier than the Surface Neo. But yeah, so far this sort of early emulator is really exciting. It gives us a good sort of look at how gestures are going to work, how users will manipulate the two screens and whatnot. And also SwiftKey has a new default theme for Duo, which is a little bit cleaner than the old one, which I'm very happy about. It's not that much different, but it's better than the old one for sure. Yeah, I'm super excited. It's got a lock screen. The lock screen is kind of different. It's very customized to Microsoft standards. Again, very early, so it looks a little bit rough right now. But they seem to be emphasizing and this could be an AOSP thing, so I'm not sure this is specific to Microsoft's image, but in the top right on the lock screen, there's your profile picture. If you tap on it, you can actually change user accounts. So
Oh.
I don't see why that would be a selling point on a phone, but hey, who knows?
No, I mean, I've seen Huawei devices have this too.
Really?
Where yeah, you can sign in multiple, like you can then sign to another account, give it to your
Yeah, I
kid
know
or stuff like
Android
that.
has that support. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if Microsoft's specific change is putting it on the lock screen, or if that was already an AOSP thing. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
Android 10's always had multi-user support. Whether or not Microsoft is sort of highlighting it as a selling point for Duo, I don't know.
Someone's asking how will developers test the postures? You can actually rotate it around.
The emulator. So an emulator's just that, right? It emulates the device. You can do almost everything if you had a real device virtually. So you can change the screen orientations, you can change the postures, you can change the orientation of the device itself. So you can turn it sideways and have both screens above and below each other, like a Nintendo DS, for example. You can do all of that. All of the stuff there you would want to do as a developer can be done through the emulator, which is kind of what it's for, right? You, as a developer, you're building apps to test these different postures and the dual screen functionality with your app, and this emulator allows you to do that.
And I'd like to mention that app phone designer who's done renders for us in the past before, like years ago for the Lumia 950, basically took your walkthrough video, one of the first ones he posted on Twitter, and then put it to an image of the Surface Duo, and it looked so cool to see it like that because we've all seen photos of the Surface Duo. Some of us have held it, but we haven't really seen the OS in action and what it kind of looks like. And when you see it all together, it actually, it really I don't know, it became way more real for me in the sense I actually got really excited for this because, and this segues into a nice conversation. So we've been having an internal debate about the camera on the Duo. And I know there are, let's talk about this, right? So I know there's a patent floating around, shows a dual lens system. It's basically two cameras on a foldable device or a dual screen device. And then when you rotate the screens around, those two cameras line up and basically becomes like a super camera. It's a really cool patent. There's no evidence, though, that that's ready for this first iteration of the Surface Duo. Now, I don't know. Maybe Microsoft, when they do a final reveal of this device and before it goes on sale, they'll come on stage and they'll do one more thing, and then we'll see this secret version that has that camera on board. But right now, I don't think there's any reason to believe that's actually coming in this version, despite that patent existing. This is always a problem with trolling patents, which is just because they have a patent on it doesn't mean it's feasible or it's doable or it's ready yet. And maybe something that they're just thinking about. And as far as we know, there's only one camera on this device. I don't want to get into the front facing. I know people are, it's a front facing camera, like,
it faces the front. That's for sure.
Yeah. And ergo front facing cameras automatically are less than main cameras, right? But conceptually, it's weird on a device that doesn't have a front or back technically, because the screens flip around 180 both ways.
Yeah.
But there's a single camera appears. We don't think there's a flash. It doesn't seem to have Windows Hello. When I asked back in October, they said, no, it's a fingerprint reader on the side. And so then the question is like, all right, so this camera probably is not going to be an amazing camera. And I mean by today's standards, when you look at like what everybody's doing right now, which is putting 2, 3, 4 different types of lenses on it, whether it's Huawei, it's the Pixel, it's Apple, there's no way this thing can compete with that, right? It's not a single lens. Now, it doesn't mean it's terrible either. Google, I think, dispelled this myth years ago when they did I would say the Pixel 2 really solidified this, where they showed how just a single camera could be really, really good if you have enough computational photography to handle that. And we don't know anything about this camera. Let's be clear. We don't know the megapixel count. We don't know the pixel size. We don't know the size of the sensor. We don't know if it's an off-the-shelf sensor or a custom sensor that Microsoft made in conjunction with like a company like Sony. We don't know that. We don't know if there's computational AI photography involved, and maybe there's a second chipset that helps with it. We don't know. So all those questions, it leaves a blank space here. That said, just knowing where companies like Razer or Essential, you have my old Essential phone, unless you sold it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an ex-Google guy, right? That's Schmidt, who left Google, started his own company, made a really cool-looking phone that had like ultra-thin bezels, right? It was the first one to have a teardrop. It was ceramic, which was awesome feeling. really beautiful hardware, and the camera was okay.
It wasn't that great though.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, it was okay. It took photos basically. And Razer's the same way.
Mm.
Now, you could argue like the Razer phone though had other things going for it. The 120 hertz display, awesome speakers, it's great for gaming, right? And those for some people were the trade-offs. But the point is, and let's not forget Nokia, HMD Global. There's Nokia's back on the market. They've been on the market for what, almost 3 years now. When was the last time you saw them highly rated for their cameras? And that's like Nokia. So this stuff is hard to do, right? I'm not saying Microsoft can't do this because Microsoft does do Connect. They did do HoloLens, which both have amazing imaging systems. I keep going on record saying the Surface cameras are the best laptop cameras you can get. And the Pro X takes it up a notch. The Pro X cameras are so good on it. So it's not like Microsoft doesn't know imaging. But looking at how thin the Duo is, I think we need to keep expectations in check. And I'd rather us go like expecting this camera to be meh and then be surprised.
Yeah,
Like, you know what?
agree.
It's pretty good, actually. They'd rather go, it's going to be amazing because Microsoft knows imaging and it comes out and it's meh, right? I don't want to walk that back. And until Microsoft comes out and says something and about the technology behind what they're doing for the camera, we have to assume that because that's just tradition. But I mean, and I'll talk about why I don't care about this in a second, but I want to know what your kind of thoughts are.
So I've never been a huge smartphone camera user. I would still buy this device if it had no cameras. That's just the kind of person I am. I'm just not huge on selfies or taking pictures. I like to live in the moment and take photos of it. I'm one of those people. But that said, one sensor, assuming it does have one sensor, that doesn't mean it's automatically going to be bad. It could be a really okay sensor. It could be, if I had to guess, this could be a OnePlus to sort of Samsung level camera, the single sensor. That said, a single sensor isn't going to beat out smartphones that have multiple sensors. If the Surface Duo does ship with one sensor, it's never going to beat the Google Pixel. It's never going to beat the iPhone. The question is that okay for this first generation device? I think it is. I think that's, as long as it can take good photos, I think it's fine. It doesn't have to be the best on the market. I do agree it shouldn't be the worst on the market, but even if it was bad to okay, yes, I'm okay with it, then yeah.
Yeah, and so I just wrote an editorial today kind of, and it just doesn't surprise anyone that would kind of defend this, but I think a pretty good explanation for it, which is I'm an early adopter, and Zach is too. We both are into cutting edge tech, and I don't mean just putting our money on the line, and buying something, but I mean doing that and then using it every day too. Because I know a lot of people say, well, yeah, but you get a lot of stuff to review, which is true. But like, for instance, the Pro X, like, yeah, okay, I have a review unit for that. I could review it, put it on the shelf and be like, all right, it was cool, but what I actually want to use is like the HP Dragonfly all the time. But I don't do that. I actually use the Pro X all the time. So just because and that's what an early adopter is. And the Pro X, I've got on record saying it's a great device for the right person, but there are trade-offs. So the question for the Duo is, it's about dual screens, which you shouldn't just look at the Duo and be like, oh, that's cool. It's dual screen, and that's it. The promise of the Duo is about work and productivity. It's about this idea of having multiple screens. You can have Skype open on one end, on one screen, have a PowerPoint on the other one, and manipulate documents between the two of them. You can have your email in one pane and the Edge browser in the other. Like, it's about getting work done and doing things you couldn't do on a regular phone, or rather, things would be harder to do on a regular phone. There's a reason why, like, sometimes you have a smartphone and you're just like, put it down, and you grab, like for me, the Pro X and start working on that. So the question is, does the actual productivity promise of the Duo deliver? Is it cool to use? Do I end up doing more on it that's creative, that helps me with my job? And that's the real question I have. That's why I'm interested in this device. I know it's cool looking, but it's really about delivering that. And that's what Panos and his team is betting on, is that, yeah, this thing is going to allow new experiences. We don't know how everybody's going to use it yet, but you're going to be able, and it's no different than people who work on a PC and have dual displays. I wrote in this article how I used to have three displays, three 27-inch displays, and that's how I worked every single day. I would have Slack always in one window, and I'd have Twitter and email in the other, and then the main window would be like Microsoft Word and my web browser, and that's how I would work. And it was amazing. I was like, in the Matrix, multitasking. And it was so efficient that when it came to reviewing laptops, I hated it because the idea of going from three 27-inch displays to one 13-inch drove me insane. I was like, how do people work like this? I can't. And so I just wouldn't use laptops. Now I'm back on a single screen. I kicked the habit. But there's a reason why people like working on multiple displays, which is you can multitask and you can observe and do things, right? If the Duo does that, then I don't mind a sacrifice and having the camera just being okay or, not. Now, if the Duo fails at that, it's just not the battery lasts 3 hours. It's a pain to do notifications and use. Then the camera being mediocre is just adding insult to that, right? And then the product is just not very good. But as I explained in the editorial, like every new category of technology goes through this phase. I point out how 4K TVs, the first one went on sale in 2014, 65-inch. It was $10,000. People bought it. Not a lot of people, but some people bought it. That you can buy now a 65-inch 4K TV on Black Friday for under $300, right? That's just 6 years later, not even 5 years later. And so the first iPhone, people keep forgetting the first iPhone not only didn't have apps, it didn't have an app platform. It was designed to be a pure web-based experience.
With 2G speeds in a world of 3G connectivity.
Yeah, right. And that was the first iPhone. And so if you bought that, you're like, okay, well, and mind you, I was coming from Windows Mobile at the time or a Palm Trio where we had tons of apps. And so that was weird, right? But who won there? I also mentioned the Trio 650. What a cutting edge device that was. When that came out, the Motorola Razr V3 was just hitting mainstream market. Motorola, and this was, if anyone who remembers, 2004, it was all about how thin and small you can make your smartphone. And Razr made this thing that was like super thin, super light. The battery, you maybe charged it maybe twice a week, and it was super popular. I went out at that same time, bought the Trio 650, which was twice the weight of it. It was so big you couldn't carry it in your front pocket. You had to sport a holster to carry it on your belt, which the ladies love. The battery life would maybe last you a day. Palm OS crashed all the time. It was, you had to have loved it. But the reason I stuck with it was because I could do stuff on that phone I couldn't do on a Razr. And that's really what all tech is about. The reason I stick with the Pro X, yeah, okay, I can't run Photoshop on it, but I could do so much more stuff on it. And that's really what all tech is for early adopters is, do you gain something that is you couldn't do before, even if you lose something early on? Like if you bought a 4K TV in 2015, you probably didn't see a lot of 4K content, right? Yeah. But it was cool.
I mean, a modern example of this right now is the Galaxy Fold, right? This is a device, this is a smartphone, smartphones already exist, that costs double the amount of a normal smartphone, which doesn't have water or dust resistance, has an incredibly fragile screen, a tiny screen on the front that you can barely do anything on. Yeah, this is a device that costs $2,000 and has sold over 500,000 of them at this point, or just about 500,000 of them. Yep. This is a great example. This device is the same sort of device Surface Duo the Surface Duo is aimed at. Sure, it does have great cameras, but I wouldn't argue that this is a good smartphone.
You talked about this privately about the front display.
So this is a good tablet. It's not a good smartphone. The front display isn't big enough to be used as a smartphone. So you are opening this screen more than not. The problem with that is you don't always want a 7.3-inch screen. When you're out and about, it's not always the right time to have a screen that big. So you use the smaller screen, but this screen is so small. Honestly, it feels like I have a 4.6-inch phone. I went from an iPhone XS or 11 Pro Max, whatever it's called, which has a big display down to this tiny thing. Now, whenever I pick up the iPhone again, I think that's the biggest phone I've ever seen when it's kind of pretty average. That's what the Galaxy Fold has done to me. That's not saying it's a bad device. This is what early adopting is all about, right? You make sacrifices for the bigger picture, which is the foldable display tech. I want to see this in more stuff. I like having the big screen when I want to actually use it. That's the trade-off you're making here. And I feel like it's the exact same thing with the Surface Duo.
And what's really fascinating by the Galaxy Fold is they had a lot of, it went out to reviewers, And then they had the folding gate issue with stuff getting under the screen, and you had to recall them, and there was a big thing, and everybody's like, aha, I told you that tech would never work. And then they went back and they said they fixed it. Everybody's like, did they though? Did they really fix it? And they
And
sold it.
they have.
And yeah, here we are, like
Yeah.
3 months on. Where are the headlines about
Yeah.
people's phones failing? They haven't. I haven't seen a single influencer or anyone on Twitter going, "Oh, the Fold broke again," and yours hasn't broke.
Nope.
So it's like they
I've
actually,
dropped this and it's not broken. It's fine.
yeah. I mean, it's like even and Samsung's an amazing company because they also had literally exploding phones a few years ago, and I remember those headlines: "Is the Note series dead?" Like,
Yeah.
how could Samsung possibly recover from phones that burned down people's houses? Man, they totally recovered. But yeah, the point is with this technology, and that's how I'm going to evaluate the Duo, which is, does it offer me a new experience, allow me to do things I couldn't do with any other device on the market? Does it do that? And if the camera has to be sacrificed a little bit there, I'm okay with that. That doesn't mean you have to be okay with it. I understand 100% why most people are not early adopters, because most people don't want to, put the money on the line and spend it, because it's always more expensive early on, a $10,000 4K TV, for instance. And two, even if like the price is all right, doesn't mean the experience is going to be good. Some people are going to be like, no, I need it all. I need the phone that works for work, business, as well as home, and has a good camera, and I just need that. In which case, that you're just the majority of people, and that's totally fine. You're not an early adopter. And early adopters, though, I mean, I remember when I had PDAs, I would spend a lot of time on forums. That's how I got started in this business, just hacking phones, hacking software, tweaking things, making it work. All of that drove XDA, PPC Geeks, PDA Phone Home, Trio Central, our original site. It drove that community and drove those companies then to respond. And that's how this all snowballed into smartphones. Like, that's where it all started, was from early adopters. And, this is just technology. I think it's super cool. But the idea of a version 1 always being perfect and meeting everyone's expectations is almost never the case when we talk about tech.
I see a lot of people arguing over whether the Surface Duo is a tablet or a phone. In my opinion, the Surface Duo is a folding phone, not a folding tablet. The reason I call the Galaxy Fold a folding tablet is because it does the tablet bit better than it does the smartphone bit. Like I said, the smartphone screen, the front screen, when you're using it in like a smartphone form factor, is too small to be comfortably used. You can barely type on it. Whereas the Surface Duo, since it has 2 displays, you can fold one of the displays all the way back and use it as a 5.6-inch single-screened phone. That's reasonably sized, and it's a single screen. It's, in my opinion, a phone for that very reason alone. The fact that you can use it as one screen, like a normal smartphone. You can take a phone, it basically fits in your hand like a normal smartphone. It might be a little bit wider than most smartphones, but it's still, that sort of basic form factor is there if you need it. Whereas on the Duo, when you fold it out, you can have 2 displays. I don't consider that to be tablet mode. I consider that to just be productivity mode. It's 2 phones joined together. That's what it is. It's not becoming one screen, although you can use it as one screen. I don't think many people will.
Yeah, no, that's a really important distinction. I would also say that, the problem with the Fold, the Galaxy Fold, is it is tablet-ish in the sense that apps need to leverage that screen ability by going like full screen. Like, I think Instagram still has problems, right, with not like cutting out content.
Oh yeah.
Whereas what's really interesting about the Duo is by default, and so this is what's cool about the developer story, and I have another editorial coming on this. But what's really neat about the developer story here is by default, any Android app already runs on the Duo without modification. Yep. What happens is it'll just launch on a single screen, which is sort of, I would say, the expected behavior. It doesn't automatically span both screens and do that instead. And so now if developers want, they can then optimize it when you drag it to the center and it goes to both screens. They can optimize that content and then like split it up or do something kind of cool. But out of the box, Android apps will be a better experience on the Duo than the Samsung Fold. And I think that's, going to be a really important distinction when we actually get to this.
I also think that not many people realize how often they're going to be using it as a single screen device, the Surface Duo. I have a feeling I'm going to be using it more often with one screen than two screens. The two screens is for productivity, yet you're not always being productive. Most of the time when you're out and about, you're going to want to use the one screen, because it's easier to hold when you're doing other things. And that's what I don't think a lot of people realize that, because in the video I did yesterday on the emulator, lots of people were saying, how am I supposed to type on the keyboard if both displays are open? Well, you fold the screen back on itself so you can hold it like a normal smartphone. That's how you would do any serious typing on it, That's sort of... I think Microsoft hasn't done a good job at sort of showcasing that. They've just been like, oh, two screens is the best. But I think the primary use case for this device will be one screen, and then you have that additional screen when you want to do more stuff, I think that's what most people are going to realize when they buy this device.
It's going to be, again, just like if you were back in the day with PDAs, watching how that stuff evolved and what people wanted to use them for is really what drove smartphones.
Yeah.
But people didn't know that ahead of time. I mean, I love using an example of like GPS and how I'd be like, oh my God, it's so cool. Like you can map and do it. And people didn't get it. They were like, why do you care about that stuff? I'm like, all I'm thinking is like, what is like Yelp now, right? Like the idea that you just like, you and I did this in Berlin. We're just walking around like, let's find a burger place. You're typing burgers, and here are all the burger places right near you, and you can like that stuff wasn't like. I mean, people take it for granted today, but it's not like in 2004 that existed, right?
Yeah.
But you could have been back then and been like, seeing that potential, which is why I got involved in this stuff. I was just like, this is. Dude, we're going to have like personal computers we walk around with. So this is just an evolution of that. But how people end up actually using something like the Duo in real life, and what apps people develop for it, how they leverage it, we don't know that full story yet. And, Microsoft, like any other good company in this, it doesn't presume every use case scenario. You have to give, people a little bit of room to sort of figure out how they're going to do this stuff.
I'm also seeing a lot of people say, this is going to be a premium device. I don't see why the camera has to be sacrificed. That's not... Just because it's a premium device doesn't mean anything has to be sacrificed. There's no reason specifically for the camera to be sacrificed. I think it comes down to bandwidth and space on the device itself.
Yeah.
The Surface Duo is incredibly thin, even when closed. I think it's no thicker than maybe it's a bit more thicker than the iPhone 11 Pro Max when closed. That's a big deal for this device.
Yeah, it's very thin. Yeah.
I just have a feeling it comes down to space. There's just not enough room to have multiple camera modules on the device, in addition to keeping it this thin and also having the battery life to last a full day. Because there's, every component inside this device is fighting for space. Microsoft has to weigh up whether they want all-day battery life, so they have to have a bigger battery. Do they make the device a little bit thicker for that, or do they try and keep the same thickness and just spread the battery out across a larger area, therefore no room for more cameras? There's so many different things they have to consider when building this device. It's pushing the boundaries in more than just one area. It's not, the dual screen foldable thing isn't really the innovative thing here. It's the hinge mechanism, it's the thinness of the device, it's the thinnest LCDs that ever in a phone apparently, or displays ever in a phone, or maybe that's the Neo. My point still stands, you get the idea. They're fighting for space inside the Duo here. So I think the camera being the missing out on being excellent, I think that's just the end result of Microsoft trying to push the device in other areas instead.
The last official measurement, I believe, was it's 7.9 millimeters thick.
Which
in the iPhone,
I have heard they have thickened it slightly since then.
Yeah, so it may be even, but to give reference, the iPhone 11 is 8.3 millimeters thick.
Right, there you go. That's what I was saying. That's incredible. That's crazy.
So I think people need to keep, and this is why I keep saying, like, when people complain about the bezels or, even the camera stuff, like, I'm telling you, like, when you hold this device, like, a little, like, your mind blown kind of goes off, because it's one thing to see it on video and that woman holding it. And even that I remember this distinctly when we saw that video and all that. When I actually saw it in person, and I went, because we had a private briefing room and they had them on display, and then they eventually passed them around. But I remember going up and seeing it for the first time, and I was just like, whoa, it's smaller than I thought it was, just in terms of the overall size. It's much smaller than I thought it was. And two, how thin it was. I was like, when you hold it, you're like, oh, this is doable. Like, this is not like hold up your Galaxy Fold. Like, your Galaxy Fold is a chunky guy.
Yeah, it's really thick. And honestly, I think it's the weakest part of the design for this device. It is incredibly thick when closed. I just don't think it looks nice when closed. I think it it's kind of a clunk. It looks like a prototype, in my opinion,
Yeah.
which is fine, you know. But Microsoft specializes in design, right? Like Surface is all about being minimalist and clean looking, and they wouldn't ever put out a device that looks like a prototype. And you know, they could make the Surface Duo incredibly thick and have cameras in it. That's not Microsoft's motto, you know. It's like we want to make this as streamlined and as good looking as possible, and if we want to shave a few millimeters, that's what we're going to do. They're kind of like Apple in that regard. And don't get me wrong, second gen, third gen, this will change and improve, and they'll find the space and they'll figure out how to do it. But for this first gen, I think the camera not being all there is allowable.
Yeah. Just for reference, the Galaxy Fold closed is, I believe, a little over 15 millimeters, 15 and a half millimeters thick.
It's a thick
So,
boy.
yeah, so that thing closed is going to be almost twice as thick as the Surface Duo closed. And that, I tell you, that it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is, one reason why I think, as you mentioned, the camera is not as big on this. And in terms of it being premium and all that, like, listen, iPhones were very premium for a long time.
And they didn't have great cameras, yeah.
And I argued for many years that camera is not very good. And anyone who owned a Lumia back in 2013 and 2012 knew it blew away the iPhone in terms of image quality. People still bought them and paid more for that phone and that experience, even though they got less screen, worse screen. Remember, the resolution on iPhones were never good. It was maybe just like around full HD for a long time. The cameras weren't very good, but people still bought them despite the camera not being great. And that was always a weird weakness with Windows Phone, which was their camera experience was so ahead of the time. No one cared except for us, right? Now, of course, I said the iPhone 11's camera is actually very good, but for years, Huawei, Samsung, and Google just ran away with the phone. But just because you have a good camera doesn't mean it sells devices either.
Now, of course, with all that said, Microsoft may surprise us and show off a Duo that has 100,000 sensors on it and it has the best camera in the world. We just don't know at this point. I will say, and I don't think I've ever said this before or revealed this, some of the earlier Andromeda prototypes had 3 cameras. It had a 4-megapixel front-facing, it had 11-megapixel rear-facing, and a 105-degree monochrome sensor as well. And those sort of worked together to do 3D scanning and whatnot. But this was back when Andromeda was running Windows and whatnot. And like I said, we haven't seen a device that has more than one sensor so far. So those plans could have been cancelled. But it's not like Microsoft hasn't been looking into this. They definitely have had a plan for the cameras in the past for previous Andromeda prototypes. And like I said, perhaps they're going to do a spring event this year where they come out on stage and go, so that what we showed off in October was the first step. Here's the second step. Here's what we've got now. And it has these cameras and whatever else. But like I said, who knows at this point? It's very early days. Microsoft did reveal officially some specs around the displays, though, which I will pull up now. So I don't think we knew the resolution of the displays. We knew the size. They're 5.6 inches each. But now we know the resolution. They are 1800 by 1350. So that's fun. I'm guessing that's, I think the DPI for that, or the PPI, is around 400, maybe 401, maybe a bit less than that. So yeah, it should be very high quality screen. We don't know if they're OLED yet. I really hope they are OLED. I'd be surprised if they're not, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and they're supposed to be the thinnest displays around too. So, there's a lot of kind of cutting edge technology here. Again, someone brought up the patent with the dual cameras. Yeah, I mentioned that earlier. There's no reason to believe that's going to be in this device. I would love for the Microsoft to get on stage and show the final version and it has that, but as of now, there's no evidence that this device has that patent instantiated. Maybe in a version 2, maybe they'll surprise us. I don't want to get in building up people's hype around this and saying, oh, that's probably going to happen, because there's just no evidence it will. Again, patents are cool. Patents don't mean it's going to be in a final product. But yeah, who knows? This we don't know if this camera is going to be good or bad.
We're just talking about what we've seen. And so far, we've not seen very much in the camera department.
And when it comes to the history of companies, first time into coming, and I know people are like, yeah, but Microsoft did the Lumia 950, and I'm like, hey, that was 5 years ago, okay? Yeah. Over 5 years ago. It was 5 years ago. They haven't made such a camera since, and the industry has completely changed. The people behind that camera are all gone. They're not at Microsoft anymore. And the industry has just moved so ahead. And I've heard people go, well, 950's camera is still pretty competitive today. No, it is not. It is 100% not. Listen, I like the 950's camera. It was pretty good. They did some interesting things, but by that point, Microsoft and the old Nokia was losing its grip on imaging. They just were, and they got quickly outpaced. That camera is still super slow. It is not nearly as good. My Honor 20 Pro absolutely destroys it. So, no, just because Microsoft has a little bit of a history here, I don't think it means anything for its device.
If you follow some of the execs at Microsoft on Instagram, or some of the engineers who are working on Surface Duo, I'm pretty sure some of them have posted pictures using the Surface Duo camera already. I'm pretty sure.
Sure.
I won't name names. I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but me and Dan have had conversations where we're looking at this photo going, I think that was a Duo photo. Because
Yeah.
some photos aren't as good as others.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if Panos is posting.
Oh, for sure. And I wouldn't be surprised if like Ralph Groen and like all of them lot. I'm pretty sure they've definitely posted photos using the Surface Duo's camera.
Yeah. So they have to know.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, with these devices being so thin, has Microsoft done real life durability testing? I mean, of
They have a
course.
durability testing lab, if that's what you're asking. They've definitely thrown them around.
Yeah, and Zach and I have talked about this repeatedly, same with the ThinkPad X1. This device has been in development for years. Like, I realize it's the first time you're seeing it, like, so it's a version 1. Internally, though, this has been going on for like four or five versions, which means, and they are testing, they carry them around, they use them. So
Yeah.
I'm not, and being it's dual screen versus a foldable display, I'm less concerned about durability. And having held it, it's glass and metal, which it feels super premium. And it's not
But it
heavy
will
feeling.
crack and smash if you drop
But
it.
if you drop the thing, yeah, it's gonna shatter. So
Yeah.
don't drop
I
it.
wouldn't. These are Microsoft's first glass devices, so they probably will be more breakable than the previous Surface devices, which have been all metal, So
Yeah.
they're
Yeah,
gonna
I'm
crack
actually
if you
more
drop it.
concerned with the Surface Neo.
Oh yeah, definite for sure,
Because the
100%.
Neo, I got to hold and play with
It's
that
heavy,
too.
right?
That
Yeah.
one, yeah, that glass of metal goes up a notch.
Yeah.
That one it feels like a glass tablet,
Yeah.
right? Like it's going to be, yeah, that one you wouldn't want to be on a sidewalk and try using
My heart
open-handed.
is already broken just thinking about
Yeah,
it.
and that's one when you put it in your bag, you're going to want to definitely put like
Yeah.
what do you call it, a
On,
sheath around or something.
so on the subject of the Surface Neo, this is sort of a good segue. Microsoft also announced the SDK for Windows 10X this week alongside the Surface Duos, except the SDK for Windows 10X isn't coming until February 11th. And that's because I'm guessing the Windows 10X image isn't ready yet. As I've said many times, Windows 10X is a little bit further behind than the Android OS that Microsoft is working on for Surface Duo. Also, February 11th is the same day as Microsoft 365 Developer Day. And Microsoft says they're going to talk a lot more about dual screens and Windows 10X in a virtual keynote, which will be streamed at 8:30 a.m. PDT on February 11th. So that's going to be like a mini build. So if you're interested in Windows 10X and dual screen experiences, I would tune into that because I think there's going to be a lot of revelations there around the operating systems, both for the Duo and Neo, and how all of that works. If you are a developer, this emulator for Windows 10X will include things like native APIs for Windows 10X and dual screens. Progressive web apps, apparently. So Microsoft says here, progressive web apps are supported out of box in the new Microsoft Edge, which can be installed directly from the browser on Windows 10X and Android. PWAs will support the same dual screen layouts, features, and tools as the browser. So being built into Microsoft Edge, web developers will be able to take advantage of the dual screens as well. So websites will be able to span across two displays if necessary and stuff, which is a big deal. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting area to keep an eye out for when it comes to PWA development. And then there's a whole bunch of documentation that they've released as well around the Duo specifically right now. The 10X stuff will be coming a bit later. But we might be learning more about Windows 10X much earlier than I was originally expecting. I wasn't expecting any of this until build. But we're getting it in February, so that's very, very exciting.
Just two things. Someone's bringing up all about Windows Phone, and Kevin, I believe his name is Litchfield.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know he's one of the diehards that's still clinging to Illumia and saying image quality is still amazing. Here's the thing: it's usability.
Oh God,
The usability in a 950 makes me want to hurl it against the
yeah,
wall.
it's
It made
bad.
me want to do that in 2015. Makes me want to do that in 2020. The idea of taking a photo, holding the camera very still, and then waiting, 10 seconds for that image to be ready is insane. If you have kids or pets, everything's moving. It's not a good camera, folks. And it listen, like just go try a Huawei P30 Pro will destroy it. If only because it has more sensors in it for wide angle, for zoom and all that. Like I have all these phones. There's no world I would ever grab a Lumia 950 in 2020, go take photos. There's not a single instance of it. And if you're clinging to it and you're thinking, well, I saw on WP, he says it's still good. You don't know what you're missing. You just,
Yeah.
the cameras are so good
It's,
now.
it's the convenience of the newer smartphones more than anything. So on the iPhone, you just press the button and you've taken the photo. It's a great photo, and it will happen in a second.
Yeah.
Whereas on the Lumia 950, you're right. You would take the photo, and if you even moved a slightly bit, it would be blurry in some areas, or it just wouldn't capture properly. The Lumia 950's camera was good in perfect conditions.
Yes, right.
And even
totally.
today is still good in perfect conditions. It wasn't a terrible camera.
Yes.
It's just you needed to have, it wasn't a good mainstream camera, if you will. I guess is the right word to say.
Yeah. The computational photography, if you've never tried a Pixel, you don't know what you're missing. I was going to talk about early adopters, Michael Fisher, aka Mr. Mobile. Like, I always laugh because when we're at events, he always has two phones with him. He has the one, whatever he's using or reviewing at that time, or he just prefers. He always has a Pixel in his back pocket. Why? Because the Pixel's camera. He says there's nothing beats that camera. He says in terms of the color science that they do, it gives you, like, he doesn't like the Huawei's, and some people don't like Huawei's because the color science is different. Partly because they're mostly sold in China. This has to do with skin tone and everything. Skin tone for people in Eastern cultures, they tend to redden a little bit more because people are very, Caucasian and white, I should say. And so the color science is different versus the Pixel, which a lot of people would say is like more accurate. But because of these reasons, he always carries two phones with him. And like, again, this is the early adopter thing. Should he have to do that? Why doesn't he just use the Pixel? Well, because he likes the stuff the other phones do better, right? These are the trade-offs people have to make. But I'm telling you, there's no way a Lumia 950 compares with today's phones, except for what Zach said. And if you're taking a photo of a mountain at 2 p.m. on a sunny day, yeah, a Lumia 950 will do quite well. Don't get me wrong. It'll be a nice photo. Yeah. But pretty much every camera can do that shot. Even an LG could do that shot. Getting back to the developer day. So this is a really cool story too, just quickly about the dual screen stuff, which is, this is why this is a little bit different this time. And I think Microsoft has learned lessons, which is they're not putting out a dual screen device based on Windows and being like, hopefully developers will, take it and do stuff with it like they did with Live Tiles, which never really happened, right? What they're doing, though, is between Windows 10X, Android, and the web, they're attacking all these fronts at the same time for dual screen experiences. It's much more likely this stuff will catch on and for the entire industry now. So Google has a vested interest in making sure that the Duo does well because they want other Android manufacturers to also make dual screen devices, because it's another reason why Android could be ahead of the iPhone. So they stand to have that. In terms of the web, again, it benefits everybody. A lot of people still use the web, whether it's on their phones or other devices. And so you have that. And then you have Windows 10X as well doing a dual screen thing. I think this is a really good change for Microsoft, where they would used to, back in the Balmer days, this would just be a Windows 10 thing, and you put it out there, like, come on, developers. Yeah. And you'd hope that they would go run with it. And Microsoft just doesn't have that clout anymore to make that happen. And I think if they did that, this is kind of blessing with them not using 10X on the Duo, which is, I think it's going to help drive the developer story, and it'll be a lot more successful early on than if this was just a pure Windows experience, which I think they still have trouble driving standards. That we saw that with the original Edge. They still have problems with getting that adopted against Google. Also, you point out this developer day thing is coming up for the stuff versus build. And yeah, who knows? Build may, Mary Jo Foley is saying that she thinks build is going to be pretty much Azure, IoT, kind of the boring stuff that you and I don't have much interest in, versus Windows development, which is what build used to be. But it seems like they are separating this story out from build. So who knows if build will actually have more in-depth stuff on this.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't talk much about it on stage, but I would be shocked if there aren't sessions at Build where developers can go and learn more about 10X and dual screens and stuff. Like, if yeah, if there aren't any sessions at Build, that would be shocking to me because Build is still a developer conference, and I'm sure lots of developers are going to Build to learn more about dual screens. So even if they don't sort of highlight it on stage, I think there will be plenty of sessions to go to where there'll be announcements and more information around 10x and whatnot. A few people have said to me, why are they releasing an emulator for 10x and not an ISO? There's two reasons for that. The first of which, remember, Microsoft is pushing the dual screen thing right now, and there are no devices right now that you can buy that run Windows that are dual screen. So they need to do it in an emulator form so the operating system can simulate having dual screens. Now, technically, you can do this on a single display as well. The other thing is you can't install Windows 10X via an ISO because the image format is different. They are more like Windows Phone images, so they were like .ffu based and stuff. They get flashed onto hardware rather than installed via an ISO. And they're, driver support and whatnot. Although they are testing these on Surface devices internally, Microsoft doesn't want you doing that. They want developers testing in the emulator so they can get the different postures and all that other stuff. I'm sure there will be some magical hackers out there who get it running on actual hardware, such as the Surface Go and whatnot. I would be surprised if that doesn't happen. But officially, Microsoft isn't supporting that right now, anyway.
So real quickly, he's asking. Question I've answered before, but once I had the Duo, what's my plan for wearables such as the Apple Watch? Yeah, it's a pain point for me. I mean, I don't want to listen. Talk about sacrifice. I'm hooked on, and Zach knows this. I'm hooked on the iPhone 11 Apple Watch.
You actually are hooked on it. I've gone back to Fitbit because it's cross-platform.
Yeah, no, just the Apple Watch has just been super useful for me because I just have so much info on it, and so it's gonna be hard. I'll be honest. And I wrote an article about this topic saying, I really hope Microsoft does a wearable because it'd make using the Duo much easier. But again, no evidence to suggest that's going to happen. I would love for it to happen, but this is going to be a sacrifice I'll probably end up making because I'm probably going to switch to the Duo because I think the experience of it will be really useful for me. Like I'll be able to do productivity work with it. But yeah, not having a wearable, I don't know what I'll do. Garmin has a few new watches out that are decent. I still do that little throw up thing every time I see Garmin's OS, and it's just so janky, and their font, and it's just their designers for the hardware is finally getting nicer looking. Everything else around it, I was like, oh, let me check. There's the new one that's out now. I forgot the name of it actually. It's got a terrible name, but they have a new one that actually looks really nice. It has an OLED display. And I was just like, all right, maybe I'll check. I'm like looking at Best Buy, like if I can go pick it up today. Like I was close. And I started watching the videos. It's just like, ugh. I'm like, no. I'm like, I can't spend $350 on this. I don't know. I don't know what we'll do about wearables. So
I'm not too bothered because I got a Fitbit, like I said. I know you want Microsoft to do a wearable. I really don't think they are. I'd be surprised if they do. It would be nice. Don't get me wrong. I'd definitely buy one. But I just... after they closed down the whole Microsoft Health thing, it's like, why would you do that if you were going to make a wearable? There's no
true.
reason.
You're not wrong. And they didn't buy Fitbit, so
no, Google did. Damn it, Microsoft! You had a chance and you missed it.
Now they got, and that's why I don't use Fitbit anymore because of Google. Yeah. Anyway, so that's that. What else have we got quickly? Oh, wow, we spent a lot of time on Duo Neo. Xbox Series X ports.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on this because we've already spoken about the ports. We kind of already knew what they were, but actual images of the Xbox Series X leaked this week in very flattering conditions, lying down on someone's carpet with a bit of dust all over it.
Amazing what happens when the product isn't floating over water.
Yeah, seriously.
It doesn't look that...
This confirms what we had sort of been talking about already. It has two USB-A ports, an Ethernet jack, a power connector, one single HDMI in, some sort of unknown port, and an audio in as well. The unknown port is, we speculate, is some sort of debug port. We don't know that for sure. Everybody I've asked hasn't been 100% on that. It could very well be some sort of port for a mystery accessory that Microsoft is yet to announce. Like I said, we don't know. But that's what it looks like from the back. It's not much to look at. It's a very basic design on the back, very minimalist. The big deal around this, of course, is that the images that did leak revealed the serial number and whatnot. Which is bad news for whoever actually owns that console because Microsoft can track that back to whoever it was issued to and fire them or get them fired, depending on whether or not they were an actual Microsoft employee or some sort of partner. And that's sad news. I doubt the person who owns this console wanted these images to come out, but they did anyway, and that's just a shame.
Yeah. Um, yeah, these photos aren't flattering, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
It is funny though, like I don't really care what it looks like, right? Because I don't. I have the the Gears of War, the Gears 5 Xbox One X, and it's amazing looking. And I also had the previous Gears one, the blood red one. Like they're not art. I mean, they're art, but they're art I don't like put on a wall that I can appreciate. They
Mm.
just kind of go into the corner, and that's how I feel about the Series X. I don't think it's great looking, but the reason it's designed that way it's so it's functional. So it not only cools everything appropriately, but it does so quietly. They don't want this thing to be a hair dryer in the background. Um, but yeah, and in terms of the ports with the HDMI, like I don't have a cable box anymore, so that doesn't really bother me. But hopefully, it won't be a problem. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway, that was that for Xbox.
Yep. Quickly, Surface Go Kensington dock. So I haven't talked about the Surface Go a lot recently, but Kensington just released a brand new dock, and Kensington made a Surface Pro dock last year, which was really cool because they get a really good review that basically turned your Surface Pro into a mini Surface Studio. And it was really wild and just fun to use. It's expensive, but it's mostly meant for professional environments. So they made one now for Surface Go, which is really interesting on a couple fronts. One, primarily this device is meant for businesses, right? So I made that very clear in a review because it's $350. I know a lot of people are like, that's the price of a Surface Go. Like, it's not really meant for like Johnny at 10 years old to have on his desk, right? This is actually meant to be sold for hotels, restaurants, kiosks, point of sales, educational environments, offices, where they want to have a small 10-inch surface, a small 10-inch Windows PC that's with touchscreen, and they can also lock it down and do things with it. So it weighs 5.5 pounds. It's solid as anything. It has tons of ports, like 4 USB-A ports, a Type-C port, 2 display out ports, 1 HDMI, 1 display port. It can do, 4K, 60 frames per second, and all that kind of stuff. Kensington so locks it down, the cables. And it's a really cool thing. But I think I just want to bring it up because it's important because this is what drives the ecosystem for Surface, right? This is important for making Surface a business solution. And it's weird because people think of Surface as like a prosumer, high-end consumer type device. But Microsoft actually has business SKUs for all its Surface line, where they ship with Windows 10 Pro, which, by the way, I saw another, Amazon review this week. Someone's like, how the Surface Pro X ships with Windows 10 Home. And they're like, they call it a Pro device, but it ships with Windows 10 Home. Like, okay, every single Surface for consumers ships with Windows 10 Home. That happened a few years ago. If you want the Pro version, you got to buy that one, and it's an extra $100. Anyway, I just thought it was a cool thing to have and to review, and it just goes to show, Surface. There's a market for this stuff, right? Also, I think it's interesting. We don't know anything about Surface Go 2. We don't know if one's coming. We assume it is. It's one of the most popular Surfaces ever due to the price point, but I find it difficult to believe. So Kensington makes this in cooperation with Microsoft, right? It gets their seal of approval and all this kind of stuff. In fact, the Kensington Go stand is powered by the Surface Docks AC connector. It's the exact same one, which is smart because Kensington gets to recycle, basically. They get to just buy the parts if I have to manufacture a new one, right? I find it difficult to believe they're going to release this and then a Surface Go 2 would come out with a completely new design that would then negate this. Because one of the reasons why the Surface team is so conservative in design, and we haven't seen the Pro's design change much, at least in its actual physical stuff, is because stuff like the docks and everything like that, they want that to continue working with these devices. So if you're a company and you buy a $300 Kensington dock for it, you can then upgrade your Surface Pro. You don't have to worry, they change it again. Now this thing is worthless and it goes into a pile. So that doesn't mean the Surface Go wouldn't be, either thinner or have thinner bezels or a different processor. It has nothing to do with that. All they need to do is keep basically the thickness the same, which is fine, and keep the Surface Connect port at the same height. And then you can still make thinner bezels. You just put a larger display in there, right? I don't know. Maybe not to read too much into it, but I think traditionally speaking, that's how Microsoft operates on this stuff. I did ask Kensington if they're going to have a Surface Pro X stand. I haven't heard back. They're going to look into it. Let me know. They may be too early to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do that.
Yeah.
So
It's a cool dock.
it's really it's pretty awesome. Like I think for consumers, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you want to use a Surface Go as like your main computer, and some people do. Um, if you're fine with the Pentium, that's all you use. This thing is pretty wild because you connect it up, and now it's put up to a display with a full keyboard. It's a pretty wild experience. But yeah. So that's that. Oh yeah, let's do the insider builds. Tell us
Well,
about what's not exciting this week.
nothing happened this week in the Insider program. Another build was released, 19551, but as per usual, there's nothing in it. Microsoft says they are doing an experiment around driver downloads. They say during this experiment, drivers categorized as optional will not be automatically downloaded and installed on Windows Insider PCs running build 19536 and newer. To install any new optional drivers available for a PC that's involved in this experiment, insiders can go to Settings, Update and Security, Windows Update, View Optional Updates, and manually download these drivers. This experiment will be running now through March 5th, 2020. So that's incredibly unexciting. The only other news that they announced this week in the Insider program is that Project Catnip, which was the PWA Microsoft was building for Windows Insiders to get Windows Insider information, is dead, or at least be on hold. I don't know what the plan is around this Project Catnip thing, but Microsoft has failed to build a PWA for the Windows Insider program, and that's basically the TLDR of that announcement. So, like I said, absolutely nothing happening in the world of Windows Insider program right now. The Windows Insider program is dead to me. It is so boring now. I haven't installed a build in, I think, 2 months. That's how long.
Maybe that's why Donna left. She's like, oh, all right.
Oh, this is on the way.
There's not
I'm
a lot
leaving.
going on here. I would go to Power Apps, which has a lot more momentum.
So, it's really sad.
Yeah, and a little side note, I did put Fast Ring on the Pro X. It broke the Wi-Fi and LTE drivers on it. Microsoft doesn't have those as separate downloadable package yet, like all of the other Surface devices. Well, I don't know why. Brandon LeBlanc said he'd look into it. So I couldn't do anything. Like I even tried the natural thing, which is I would connect up a Type-C Ethernet dongle to it, connect up to Ethernet, and I'll be like, all right, I'll just get internet this way. It'll go to Windows Update.
Yeah.
It could probably download some drivers. That's usually how the stuff works. Nope, that wouldn't work either. Like the whole internet ability of this device was nuked. So I went back to release preview, then went to Slow Ring, and Slow Ring actually worked pretty well. It was fine. I actually had no issues with it, but the only thing that changed was Cortana. And actually, like you and I talked about this privately about the new Cortana experience. It's pretty impressive. It actually does some really cool stuff if you're in the US. But it was actually kind of neat. I actually kind of liked it, but there wasn't much. I just went back to the release preview, and I'm just keeping the Pro X like that because I use the Pro X all the time. So I actually kind of just want it to be kind of stable. But
yeah, hopefully maybe build will be where they announce some new stuff for Windows 10 desktop. I doubt it.
Yeah, and real quickly about that, so about 10X, and a lot of people are like, oh, would Surface Go 2 ship with the 10X? No. I think if you're looking for 10X and like the Surface line, besides Neo, you're talking 2021 at the earliest.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, Microsoft is for some reason really pushing 10X as a dual screen platform or foldable platform at launch, even though we know it can run on more traditional form factors like the Surface Pro and whatnot on Surface Go, but that's just not an area that they're focused on right now. If you want Windows 10X, you'll have to buy a dual screen or foldable PC, unfortunately. Well,
yeah,
maybe
and
not
then
unfortunately.
And as Surface Go 2 goes with ARM, which, again, we don't know. I wrote a post.
I'd be surprised if it doesn't.
Yeah, I wrote a post this week saying it's a real possibility now with that price point we've seen with education. We talked about this a little bit last week, but yeah, the first education laptops came out or were announced $300 price point running the Snapdragon 7C. I mean, you bump that up by $100 and improve the hardware. Yeah, that's Surface Go, right? But if you do that, yeah, you definitely can't have 10X because 10X doesn't do ARM yet. So you're talking at least. So, I mean, that's really interesting to talk about. We can really get ahead of ourselves. Like late 2021,
yeah,
Surface Go 3 Windows 10X, ARM, like that now is like that's sort of the little dream computer, right? Because now
Yeah.
you're talking potentially all day battery life, always connected, super fast, built on this new OS, like still runs all your apps you want it to.
Also, this is Microsoft, so that won't be ready until at least 2022.
2022. That's probably more realistic,
Yeah.
but that is sort of I would say the roadmap for a lot of
Well,
this
the
stuff.
next 10 years is going to be exciting.
Yes, we have plenty of work for ourselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I think we'll wrap up the podcast for this week. As always, we're going to do some Q&A now. So if you have questions that we didn't answer during the podcast, start putting them in the chat rooms right now. We'll start going through those. If you're listening to this recorded, of course, you don't get to hear this part. Sorry about that. It's a little too awkward to record, but you can always join us Fridays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on mixer.com/Windows Central. You can also follow us on YouTube on our Windows Central channel there. We both have chat rooms on those, and we like to talk to you guys and take your questions. You can follow me, Daniel_Rubino, Rubino, on Twitter and Instagram for more information. And if you want to ask me something there, follow Zach at ZACBOWDEN on Twitter, and he'll definitely ask and answer your questions on all things Windows. Other than that, as always, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Take care, everyone.
Cool. So yes, question time. I think Channel 9 is still with us. Maybe they left. I can't. They literally joined the second we stopped talking about Xbox.
Oh,
Yeah.
womp womp.
Oh well, you were too late. That's not our problem. What am I doing here? Oh yeah. Any news if the Surface Duo will be sold by phone carriers? Microsoft has not formally announced that that will be the case. I will say the Surface Pro X is sold by some carriers, at least here in the UK. But I think O2 and maybe someone else. I don't know. Is that the case in the US as well, Dan?
I don't believe so. I think it's just sold. It's unlocked. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
by the
yeah.
way, this week Sprint starting to offer unlimited 4G LTE plans for $15 a month
Wow.
through the eSIM package on the Pro X, which is pretty wild. Sprint's okay for data connection, but $15 a month is mad cheap for unlimited data, even if the data speeds are not as good as the other ones. I actually have that, and it's good. It's one of those, if you only use data on occasion, it's really nice to have. And $15 a month is not a sacrifice for a lot of people versus like T-Mobile, it's like $30 a month. Faster speeds, but $30 is a little bit more of a hit in the wallet. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised in the U.S. if they team up. Verizon and AT&T have been big partners with Microsoft in the past. AT&T definitely. AT&T is, I mean, who knows if that's changed, but AT&T was like had every device out there for Windows Phone.
Do you believe Microsoft will ever make another wearable with Android Wear? Maybe. I hope not. Android Wear sucks.
Yeah, that's the conundrum here. If they
Yeah.
made a wearable, the default people say is like use Android Wear, but Android Wear sucks. And I don't say that as someone because I hate Google. It's just that's kind of the consensus. And Google doesn't seem that interested in doing much with it. Samsung knows this, which is why Samsung is like, oh, we're not going to use that. So they use their own Tizen. Yeah, they would have to do a customized firmware thing, which I think is fine. I think if you're selling the Duo and it's 15 or $1,200, making a $300 custom wearable that's really high quality that runs perfectly with it, that's smart marketing for me. Like that completes the package. I find it weird that they wouldn't do it, but this is Microsoft. Someone's asking, do I still use the Pro X? Oh yeah, I mean I use it. I use it so much. I'm having a difficult time getting reviews out for other devices. That's how. I also did finally find a matte screen protector that fits it perfectly. It's $25. I'll probably put it on Twitter or Instagram this weekend. But it's one that actually they did a really nice job with it. So.
Will the Duo be eSIM and real SIM? I don't know. I think it has a real SIM port, right? At least a
Yeah,
SIM tray.
yeah. It has I think it'd be both.
Any sources? Any of our sources mention radio bands for Duo CDMA? Unfortunately, not. I do know that I believe it works in the UK, which has slightly different bands from the US. I think. And I don't know which bands specifically it will have in either US or UK.
Yeah, it's
Unfortunately.
probably gonna be a world band. The Pro X is a world band
Yeah,
device.
yeah.
That's
Is
same with the
it?
Surface Go.
Yeah. Is it too late to buy the Surface Go in 2020? If you can get a good discount on it, I'd go for it.
Yeah, it's still a fun device.
But I wouldn't be surprised if a Surface Go 2 is happening this year.
Yeah.
If the Duo is successful, do you think MS would do a single screen? I don't. And
I
the
don't
reason
think
for
so.
that is one, Microsoft wants to differentiate, and two, as I mentioned on the podcast just then, I think the whole being able to fold the screen back on itself to just be a single screen phone will be so convenient and so just easy that they won't need to do one with the single screen because the Duo can already do it. You know, there's no need to do that unless they really wanted to be competitive with pricing, which I do not think they want to do. This is a lot of people are like asking how does Microsoft expect they're going to sell on this? Like, you know, I don't think Microsoft thinks they're going to sell many of them at all, and you know, and that will be decided on how much it costs, and I think it's going to be very expensive. And I think that's by design because they don't really care if it doesn't sell that much because it runs Android and therefore there is no uphill battle for an ecosystem. It already has one. And they can just, you know, they can make them to order, you can sell them. And the people who do buy them, they get some, you know, support through software because, you know, developers already support Android.
Yeah, I don't see much need for a single screen phone. I think it's like they just become then just another device, and it's a step back, right? The whole point they're trying to drive the category forward.
It's like they admit that they were wrong about the Duo.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there any rumors of other manufacturers building dual screen devices like Duo? So I'm assuming you're talking about smartphones. Not that I know of. I think Samsung are all in on the whole single foldable screen idea. Yeah, I don't know anyone else. I think LG did the G8X, which is sort of technically a dual screen smartphone, but in a sort of clunkier design, not as integrated.
Yeah, I think we'll see. We know at least on the PC side, companies are experimenting with both, and part of that's because they deliver different experiences. I've said before, like dual screens is cheaper, so it's cheaper than a single folding display. But a single folding display gives you uninterrupted content, which is good for watching videos, right? But I would say working, it's a little bit better to have dual screens. So there are going to be pros and cons to each. And I think you'll see both being reflected for phones and PCs going forward. Do you think Windows 10X will be successful? They might put it onto smaller devices like 7-inch tablets. No.
Oh, no, well, maybe not 7-inch tablets, but if Windows 10X is successful, you can guarantee Microsoft will put it everywhere and anywhere they can when it comes to form factors.
Yeah, it's just right now. Yeah, I mean, for us tablets, but it really depends. Microsoft, there were a lot of Windows 8-inch tablets.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying more than foldables. I think that's what the guy's sort of asking.
Yeah.
I don't think specifically 7-inch tablets is their next step, but, you know, a more than just foldable PCs is definitely on the agenda. If Windows 10X is successful, you can expect to see this operating system launching on laptops, tablets, PCs even at some point, like actual desktops. It'll be everywhere.
Yeah, it's I just know I don't think from the developer story in the past I don't see this like
not 7-inch tablets.
I'd be surprised if like this became so popular. Like I know a lot of people what they're driving towards is like so maybe we'll see a Duo with 10X, like a Duo 2 or Duo 3. I listen, I'd love for that to happen. I love for 10X to come out and it's so amazing. Everybody's like Snapchat's on board. They're like, yeah, let's do it. You know, like I just don't see that happening as much as I would love it to.
Yeah. Have we heard any more on Teams for Life? Do we feel it will replace all of Microsoft chat services? No and no.
Yeah, I don't know the status of that.
Actually, probably I wouldn't say anything. Never mind. But could two screens be a first step before foldable screens actually get good and cheaper? So Microsoft has prototypes of Andromeda that had single screens. They've definitely prototyped single foldable screen versions of this device in some form or another. They've purposefully gone for the dual displays because they genuinely think two screens with the seam down the middle makes you more productive than one full display. And after using a Galaxy Fold, I kind of agree. I like the big screen, but I like using one app at a time on it. In software I could split it down to the middle so I can have two apps at a time. I never use it. On the Duo, I would use it way more because each screen is dedicated to that specific app, and it just works better, in my opinion. And I think Microsoft is right. I know lots of people think, they're talking out of their backside and they say, oh, two screens makes you more productive. The seam is important to the experience. I genuinely think they're right. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see if that's actually turns out to be the case. Does the SDK give any hints as to what type of system apps Microsoft will include? No. And honestly, I would not be surprised if the phone and SMS apps are Google, or just like the default Android ones, which I believe Google makes. Maybe there'll be a gallery specific one that backs up to OneDrive made by Microsoft. The camera app will be Microsoft. Obviously Edge, Outlook, Microsoft Launcher, they'll all be pre-installed. Office will be pre-installed as well. So all of your sort of all essentials apart from phone and messaging, I think will be all Microsoft. But I'd be surprised if Microsoft builds its own phone and messaging apps for the device.
Well, they have SMS Organizer. I think that's what people are asking.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're going to use that.
I'd be curious. I could see going either way. SMS Organizer has very good reviews. People seem to like it. I don't know. Could be a thing. Don't know. But the emulator is not really a sign. At least not yet. It's too early. But as we get closer to release, you'll probably see them start to put in more default apps and everything.
Yeah. Any news about Office apps getting specific updates for dual screens? I wouldn't be surprised if they do have specific updates. I don't know how far they can take it because, do I need to have my Word document split across two screens? Probably not, but I'm sure there'll be support for it. Do you think the Duo will have some form of continuum/DeX? So I know Android 10 has the platform for that. OEMs can go in and build out a continuum mode for their devices running Android. Whether or not Microsoft does, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because that was sort of the whole original pitch of Windows 10 Mobile, right? And they could sort of bring it along here for the Duo. But we'll have to wait and see if that turns out to be something they pursue. If Windows 10X can run full Win32 programs, what are its limitations? So we don't know for sure what the limitations are right now. We do know that Win32 programs are sandboxed. So when you launch a Win32 program, what it's actually doing is spinning up a version of legacy Windows 10 in the background that's containerized in such a way that it doesn't affect the main system. So that app can operate in its own box, but I do not think it can affect the actual native Windows 10X OS in any way. So malware, for example, shouldn't be able to sort of affect the system and stuff, unless it's a network thing, in which case you're in trouble. But you get the idea. I think there'll be limitations around what apps can do to the native operating system, but otherwise they should run just like normal, I believe. Can the keyboard on the Duo extend to two screens? Not. I haven't really played around with Suki too much in the emulator. I don't know for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if it can in the final product. I know for a fact if you turn it on its side and you open up, you tap on, you have an app at the top that has a text field, the keyboard pops up and takes up the entire of the bottom screen, which is kind of cool.
So any updates on camera from Microsoft Duo? Shoot, we should have had a discussion on that. We should have spent 40 minutes talking about the Duo and the camera.
Or maybe he thinks just between then and now, have you heard anything new?
Yeah, right.
Do you ever think we'll see a Surface with Thunderbolt 3? I rely on an eGPU every day, and it's the only thing that's holding me back from getting a new Surface. I don't think so. What I think that Microsoft is waiting for more specifically is USB 4, right? Which has all of the Thunderbolt 3 things.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we'll see a specific Thunderbolt 3 port, but I think we'll just see USB-C ports with USB 4 compatibility, which has everything Thunderbolt 3 has, plus more, I guess.
What do you ask your barber for when you get a haircut? Slight disconnect. I actually wrote it down once because my barber told me.
Really?
Yeah,
I know what I asked. Mine's a number 2 on the back and sides and a few inches off the top every single time.
Chipped, squared with a slight disconnect.
Wow, is that universal barber language? Can I just ask that and they know what that means?
You can try.
I'm gonna try and get the same haircut as Dan.
Chipped, squared, with a slight disconnect. There you go. That's the secret.
I think the room is that the iPhone 12 won't have a new design. Will that help the Duo's reception? I don't think it will because the Duo is not aimed at the same market as the iPhone. People who are interested in the iPhone will not buy the Duo, even if the Duo is amazing in every single way. They're not aimed at the same market.
Any update in the Lumia 950 camera? Yeah, it's 5 years old, and I don't know why you'd still be using it. Go buy a new phone. Like, geez, go buy a Pixel 3a. You'll be fine. You'll love life.
Will the Duo come with Android 11 since it will be available? I do not believe so. I think Surface Duo will launch with Android 10 only because I think it will launch earlier than holiday 2020. I've been hearing whispers that it will launch way before the Surface Duo, the Surface Neo, probably before Android 11 is ready. So it will ship with Android 10. If what I've heard is correct, of course. I don't think there's enough time between Android 11 being done and the Surface Duo shipping. If it does ship in holiday 2020, October, November will be when it ships. If that's the case, Android 11 is done in August, September. There's not enough time. So it'll be Android 10 at launch. Right. Any more questions? So the question I have for Duo, will it be an 865 or an 855? That is the question. And I think it will depend on when it launches. If it launches in the spring, it'll be an 855, I think. I'd be surprised if it's an 865 then. If it launches in the fall, I would hope it's an 865.
Yeah, hard to know.
How much do you believe the Duo will cost? I think it's going to be $1,500.
$12.99.
$12.99.
I don't know. It's one of those. It's hard because they could release a version with like 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage, and make it like $1,000. But it'll be the version you don't really want, right? So they could actually try to hit that price point just by cutting the internal specs.
Yeah, that'd be a big splash if they could do a $1,000 version.
Yeah, but then everybody would be like, don't buy that version. Buy the $1,300 one. Yeah, who knows? All I know is, like I said, the dual screens are supposed to be cheaper to make than a single foldable display. So,
but that said, Surface is a premium device, so they charge extra for the logo anyway. And two, it's a premium device. It has a special hinge mechanism. I'm sure there's lots of R&D that's gone into that device that bumps the cost dramatically anyway.
Is the edge on the Duo, the physical edge, too sharp to push against your ear?
I heard it cuts you if you look at it weird.
Yes, yeah. That's why Panos is always bleeding on the side of his head. Honestly, I admit that when the first time I got the Duo and held it, I didn't put it to my ear.
You didn't? Hello?
No. And it's mostly because that's kind of the point, in my opinion, of the device, which is why it's hard for people to grasp, which is this is sort of a concept of a device built around the idea that we don't make phone calls all the time on our phones anymore. And so, but I'll be sure to take that into consideration when I get a review unit.
If it's $2,000, I'm not going to be happy. I don't think Duo will be $2,000. That would be too much money. I think the Neo will be $2,000. I don't think the Duo.
Yeah, the ThinkPad X1 is $2,500.
Yeah. So
that's a full-on Intel computer.
Yeah. With
a 13-inch 2K OLED display. Yeah.
How do you feel about the soon coming Surface earphones? I guess in the earbuds. They look cool. I'm going to buy them.
Yeah.
Even though they are incredibly expensive for what they are.
I just, as I said before, I don't commute. I don't use those. The same reason I haven't bought Apple AirPods. When I go to the gym, I use special gym earpods, right? So.
Do you think Microsoft will showcase the Duo at MWC? It's a good question. We don't know. I don't see why they would. I think they'd want to hold that for their own event.
Unless they have something new to share.
Yeah.
But
right, if a camera announcement, for example.
Yeah, right. I mean, they want to advance the story. Like, all right, we see Dan's whining about the camera, worried about it. We should get ahead of that story and talk about the camera. That'd be a smart
Microsoft.
idea, Microsoft, by the way.
Yeah, seriously.
And if they want to do that at Mobile World Congress,
It'd be a good
then
stage to do it. At the same time, I feel like the Duo is Microsoft's baby, and they would want to do their own event for anything Duo related.
True.
Because, to be fair, they did do HoloLens 2 at MWC, but I feel like there's a reason for that. The HoloLens 2 isn't really a consumer-focused product at all, whereas the Duo has some sort of consumer interest, even though it's primarily a sort of productivity-based thing.
Yeah, it's funny with Neo. Neo is really interesting because it's like I haven't really thought about it too much compared to other PCs, how it's going to change the way I use computers. And part of that's just because phones are one thing you're always carrying around with you. But there's a lot more unknowns about Neo, including battery life, performance, LTE. Like I don't think it has LTE, which is a bummer.
I think it's fair to say that the Neo project, which includes the operating system, is a lot further behind than the Duo one. Because we've got to remember, Duo started development in like 2016. I don't think Centaurus, the Neo, started until the end of 2017. Maybe even into 2018. Like it's a much newer project, and Windows 10X, although it is based on Windows Core, 10X was also sort of spawned in 2018, rather than the original Andromeda OS, which was 2016 era. It's a lot newer, and therefore I think it's a little bit further behind than the Duo project, which makes sense. Like I said, Duo has good things going for it because it's based on a platform that's done. Android 10 was done in August last year. They're just adding their own customizations on top of it. And the hardware has been in the works forever. So, that they've got that nailed. So, yeah, the Duo is definitely much further ahead.
This is asking about the processor for Neo. It's a Lakefield processor. It's latest generation, 10 nanometer primary Sunny Cove core, and has Tremont cores. It's called a hybrid processor. It's this new thing from Intel. It has Foveros 3D chip stacking technology. So it's brand new. It's not anything you've seen before. It's also what's going to be in the X1 Fold from ThinkPad from Lenovo, which we couldn't say publicly. And they won't say publicly because Intel really hasn't gone into detail about Lakefield and models yet and all that kind of stuff. But that's where you're going to be seeing these devices.
If the Duo is coming early, do you think summer or back to school time? It's hard to say because obviously this can change very easily. But from what I understand, I think Microsoft wants the Duo to be ready in time for build, or like May time. So is May spring or summer? I think it's spring still, right? So spring.
Yeah.
Spring/summer.
Let's see. When's the first day of spring?
Spring equinox is on Friday, March 20th,
Oh,
2020.
Should ask for summer. When's the first day of summer?
Summer solstice.
June 20th.
Yeah, so
there you go.
so spring.
Thank you, Cortana.
The first time she's ever been helpful.
That's not true. All right, I'm hungry.
Are you ready to go? Okay. One more question because this is an interesting one. Windows Next looked really sluggish when Rich was tested it. You think they can polish it up as much as Windows 8 was when it was launched? So, yeah, Windows 10 X is kind of sluggish. Lots of people I know internally are complaining about it as well. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. One, it's not done. It's still got at least, I think it's supposed to be feature complete this month or next month, but it won't be done until summer, so June, July time. So there's still plenty of time for them to fix it up and make it all smooth and stuff. But you are right, the current builds, at least the ones from early January or late December, they are a bit animation laggy here and there, and I think that's just the nature of development and stuff. That's why Microsoft has been very sort of what's the word, coy when it comes to like press play with Windows 10 X. In fact, they haven't let them in any official capacity. The only reason Rich Wiz got one is because he asked someone at Lenovo who didn't know that. But yeah, the consensus has been for Microsoft to not let anybody who isn't a Microsoft employee or somebody who's working on these devices play with the software. So yeah, I think it'll be fine. I would be shocked if they ship it in that state. All right, I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, as always. We'll be back. Are you on holiday next week, Dan, or are you back next Friday?
No, next week I'll be back.
Cool. Until then, thank you for watching. We shall see you then.